RIMS is global. Discover why 10,000 of your peers in more than 60 countries are part of the world's largest risk management community. Visit rims.org/membership to find the best membership for you and your organization. Coming to you from RIMS headquarters in New York, this is RIMScast, the official podcast of the Risk and Insurance Management Society. I am Justin Smulison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS and your proud RIMScast host. This is episode 403. Our guest is Eric Lobser. He was a practitioner in the natural gas sector for 35 years, and we're going to get his ERM philosophies today. But first, let's talk about the RIMS-CRMP. We are delighted to announce that on August 27th and 28th, RIMS President Manny Padilla will be leading the two-day in-person workshop at St. John's University at 101 Astor Place in New York City. A link to the registration is on this episode's show notes. And on to virtual workshops. RIMS will partner up with PARIMA for the RIMS-CRMP on September 1st and 2nd. Registration links are on this episode's notes. Also on the webinars page, you will see a two-part series hosted by the RIMS membership department. The Classroom to Career webinar series highlights how RIMS equips students with the knowledge, skills, and connections needed to thrive in risk management careers. Participants will gain insights into industry trends, career pathways, and practical tools that help them confidently step into the evolving world of risk management after graduation. These sessions will be hosted on September 1st and 9th. These sessions are member exclusives and complimentary for members, of course. So if you are interested in becoming a member, this would be the time. Visit rims.org/membership. Folks, RIMS is back on YouTube. Our handle is at RIMS Official Channel. We've got plenty of videos there, including RIMScast, RIMScast Canada video podcasts, and other informative and entertaining content from RIMS. Subscribe to the channel today. We have more plugs later. Let's get on with the show. We will take a deep dive into enterprise risk management with our guest, Eric Lobser. Eric recently retired from a 35-year career in the natural gas sector. He remained with one company that eventually became Spire Energy. Eric is also a member of the RIMS Strategic and Enterprise Risk Management Council. So we will discuss his career journey, how one role led to the next before ultimately settling on enterprise risk management and making a difference, and his philosophies into what makes ERM truly valuable, and why perhaps the acronym could use a little bit of an upgrade. Let's get to it. Eric Lobser, welcome to RIMScast. All right, I am joined by my friend Eric Lobser, and Eric is a member of the RIMS Strategic and Enterprise Risk Management Council. We value his contributions to us. Eric, welcome to RIMScast.
Thanks so much, Justin. Great to be here with you today.
Yes, it's wonderful to see you. And I know you a little bit. We met actually last year during a webinar, and you are a great mind for me to mine when it comes to ERM. And you have a fascinating career, and I'm going to set the stage for everyone. Your entire career was at Spire.
Yes. Originally, it was Laclede Gas Company, then became the Laclede Group, and then Spire. Yes.
Right. So an entire 35 or so years, right?
Correct. 35 and some months. Yep.
Wow. So I think right off the bat, that shows our audience, or that demonstrates to our audience, that you can have a risk career at one company. You do not need to jump around if you're doing well, if you're comfortable, if the company's treating you right, and you're doing a good job, right?
Correct. Mostly. The risk career came later in my life.
Mm-hmm.
It was sort of the culmination of a lot of other things that I did, because I had a pretty varied set of positions at Spire. And, over time, it was multiple types of companies, essentially. As you go through CEOs, things change. And I think I was there for about 5 CEOs, and, got to see many different sides of how a business operates, and enjoyed them all.
Excellent. So let's go back to the beginning. What led you to what is now known as Spire?
Good question. I graduated Boston College in 1990, and it was kind of a tough job market. Was planning to find a job out on the East Coast, but very expensive place to not have a job. So came back home. At the time, my stepfather had a contact at the Laclede Gas Company, and met with them, had some interviews, and they offered me a position, and so I took it. Oddly enough, within 2 weeks of being there, I said, if I stay at this job more than a couple years, I'm pretty much crazy. It was very odd that they had a few computers there. I came from a school where they had a library full of computers and access to it, and you had to sign up to use the computer.
Sure.
And so it was a lot of using the 10 key and things like that. But it really forced you to use your mind, and instilled definitely patience. And throughout my career, some of those elements have been valuable to me.
Yeah. And so you started out as a budget analyst?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, I did that for about a year and a half, and then I must have caught somebody's attention. They, this was down in their corporate offices in downtown.
Downtown where?
St. Louis. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, at the time I didn't know it, but then I found out that was called the Ivory Tower by the operations folks. But I was fortunate enough to then move out to operations and do the same sort of work, but from the other side, out in operations, and work with all the department heads to help them with their budgeting, translate things from operations into financial terms, get better relationships with the people that ran the business, and better understand the business from, sort of the boots on the street kind of view.
Yeah. And so we're gonna jump ahead a little bit. It
Okay.
was in August of 2001 when you became the managing director for strategic planning and corporate development. Is that when risk management and ERM started to come onto your own radar?
A bit. There was some in Treasury where I dealt with some property insurance type of stuff. Obviously, you've got big commodity risk at a natural gas company. You see market risks with interest rates and things like that, credit risk in Treasury. But then, yes, in strategic planning, this was something new to then the Laclede Group, taking the budget period and extending it out 3 years, rolling in strategy and strategic planning, and help them to develop a software sort of custom made out of Access for business planning that helps support our balanced scorecard that we rolled out, and also in there included something for initiatives. So if you wanted to make some improvements, you had to tie that to metrics. It also then had action items, and then a section where you had to lay out your different risks, what you were doing to mitigate those. And the action items often required the support from other functional areas. And part of the software would then put that in somebody else's business plan so they could see that and sort of force collaboration. So the two elements, I think are sort of kind of hand in hand, risk management and collaboration, because it's very hard to do that on your own. So, you're right. That's probably where it started, even though I didn't really realize it at the time.
Right. And was there a particular project, crisis, or leadership opportunity that changed the way you think and broadened your risk lens or perspective?
Good question. Wasn't particularly an event. It was a change in leadership where we went from mostly looking at sort of operational excellence and continuous improvement, more inward looking, to a more external look. And so I got the opportunity to look at other businesses. At the time, it was looking at ways to diversify within the gas industry, areas that we knew about, storage, pipeline, some E&P, things like that. And so, that element was kind of the beginnings of a lot of the thought processes that I would go through later and reap the benefit of when you're looking at different businesses, what can go right with them, what can go wrong. And so part of modeling acquisitions is taking a look at those scenarios and seeing, okay, what's the probability that they have a downside? What does that downside look like? What's going to drive that? What has to go right in order to have sort of the best case? What's the base case look like? What are those probabilities? And so I think that was the beginning of really understanding how risk and business go hand in hand. Obviously, they can't have opportunity without the risk. There's no reward without the risk. So definitely was an element of that job, and I was fortunate enough to have a tremendous boss during that time that really helped me, gain some critical thinking about how things operate.
Excellent. Now, when you say that you look at how other companies operate, are you looking beyond your own sector or industry?
No, we were looking within the gas industry. We wanted to stay within our, knowledge base. The period that I went to school in and kind of grew up in, where people were trying to diversify for diversity's sake, had kind of turned, and people were looking at simplifying businesses, sticking to their knitting, as some would say. And so it was looking at within the natural gas value chain. So from we'd always say from wellhead to burner tip. So looking at exploration and production, gathering and processing, pipelines, underground storage, and then all the way down to uses for it, including compressed natural gas for vehicles and local distribution companies, utilities.
I think we have the title for our episode now: from wellhead to burner tip with ERM. Basically, would be it. That's great, though. And you seem to have done really, really well in that 13-year period when you were in strategic planning and corporate development. You held several positions there, but that was seems like a real key time in your career.
Absolutely, yes. It definitely was my favorite period of time. Although, in the end, that's stepping back a little bit. That's kind of what I went to school for. I was really excited about getting into the investment banking career, and doing acquisitions. Was a key element of that. And so I finally got to do what I went to school for. Really enjoyed it. Really got my mind working. Was very exciting. But at the same time, it was a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
Was also extremely stressful. And so without realizing it, I found that maybe this wasn't the best place, at least for me personally, to spend my lifetime, because of the level of work and stress that was involved. And prior to that, got married and raised a family, and so that had to come into play as well. And while my wife was very patient with me during all those times, extremely patient with me, sometimes working round the clock, I felt like this wasn't the right long-term opportunity for me.
Right.
And one of the things that I learned when I was doing acquisitions was I developed models for how utilities make money.
Oh.
And so in order to understand that, I worked with some people that did rate cases at our company and better understood what drove cash flow. And so that in doing so, I got really intimate with how regulations work, how tariffs work. And so that led into, okay, if this isn't the right career for me, then, taking a look at something next to that, which was regulatory and government affairs.
Yes. Now, I've worked with some folks who either do that full time or they do that on behalf of us here at RIMS at the Legislative Summit.
Okay.
And it's a fascinating area. And tell us about that and what the transition was like. Seems like it was pretty seamless for you.
Seamless in that, it was something that I'd already started to learn about. But something that once I was kind of in charge of it, and it, basically was starting from not quite a blank piece of paper, but it was based off of how regulations were in Missouri. It was something where it only happened every, say, 3 or 4 years. And so there was no formal group pulled together. But one of the things that we did when we were in acquisition mode First acquisition was another company in Kansas City, Missouri. So we were all within one state. Second acquisition was within Alabama, Alagasco. And that was a completely different type of rate making approach that did it annually. And so they had a formal department. So I was asked to sort of develop something more formal for the entire company. Then we acquired Energy South, which then brought us down into Mobile and also Mississippi. So a third rate jurisdiction. And so there was kind of a mountain of information to climb to get there, but based off of previous career in corporate development, the sort of thirst for knowledge, the drive was still there. And so, I like to think that I came up the curve pretty quickly, but found out, relationships and the stuff between the lines is just as important, if not more important, than the stuff that you can read about and study.
Oh, tell us more about that, the relationships part of things.
It's, one of kind of pulling from my, risk, enterprise risk career. One of the things that they look at in terms of impacts is not just financial, but reputation. And that is a huge element of rate setting, because your reputation precedes you into essentially, it's not quite a courtroom, but you litigate rate cases. You've got a commission that oversees it. You've got parties to the case, and so it pretty much is similar to litigating. And the different parties that are involved, people are allowed to intervene: industrials, AARP, other groups, low income groups, energy efficiency group, and various parties. And so, understanding where they're coming from, what their key elements that they're trying to achieve, and working towards something that gives them a little bit of what they want and also gives us a little bit of what we want. Now, that was a key element of doing it. But overall, if you were a bad operator, if you had a significant incident that showed that you weren't a safe operator or you weren't treating your customers well, none of that mattered, because going into the rate case, people had their mind set that they wanted to not only not give you a rate increase, but have a rate reduction. And so learn the value of the relationships and the reputation, stuff that is kind of gray and in between the lines. It's not just about what the numbers are, but kind of who you are as a business.
Let's take a quick break and talk about all the fantastic RIMS events coming up in 2026. The 11th annual Chicagoland Risk Forum will return to the old post office on Thursday, September 24th. Visit chicagolandriskforum.org for more information. The RIMS Western Regional Conference will be held October 4th through the 7th in Seattle, Washington. The agenda is live and registration is now open. Visit RIMSwesternregional.com and the link on this episode's show notes for more information. And save the dates, October 18th through the 21st. We will be in Quebec City to celebrate the 50th live RIMS Canada Conference. Booth sales are open and sponsorship opportunities are still available. And advanced registration is open now. Visit RIMSCanadaConference.ca for more information, and also remember to check out rims.org/Canada for our spin-off show, RIMScast Canada, hosted by National Conference Committee Chair Aaron Luconi. The RIMS-ERM Conference 2026 will be held November 19th and 20th in Columbus, Ohio. Registration is open, and through August 21st, you can nominate a program for the RIMS-ERM Global Award of Distinction. If you know of an ERM program that is award-worthy, we want to hear about it. A link to the nomination form is on this episode's show notes. Visit rims.org/ERM 2026. And folks, can you believe it? We're already looking to Risk World 2027, which will be held over 4 days in New Orleans, Louisiana, April 18th through the 21st. The call for session proposals is now live and will stay active through August 21st. And let's talk about Risk World registration. RIMS members can exclusively register by September 4th for the best rate and get first access to the hotel block. Hotel reservations open October 28th ahead of of public registration. Sitting this out is the real risk. The link to registration is on this episode's show notes. And now let's return to our interview with Eric Lobser.
We're back with Eric Lobser. We're talking about his career and how it can have a risk foundation and then evolve and morph over time. I did want to talk a little bit about compliance, because this is something that a lot of risk managers or de facto risk managers have to keep on their radar. And compliance obviously would be a big deal for a natural gas company. So tell us what your experience was like and the sorts of things that were on your radar at the time.
Well, over the period of my career, it really came home with something that, a critical infrastructure utility delivering a relatively volatile product to people's homes. It's very safety oriented. And so a lot of rules and regulations and areas of compliance. And one of the things that we faced and the whole industry faced was a need to, replace some of our aging infrastructure. So that first started when I was in Treasury and, trying to think about, well, how are we going to afford all this replacement that we're going through? Then, came again in, regulatory, where basically trying to understand the balance between replacing everything quickly and then having a really big impact on customers and rate cases to, what's the right balance of things between safety and rates and, what's best for the business, what's best for the customer. Compliance is not something that you can really decide, I want to do a little bit or a lot. Basically, you have to, at least meet the minimum standards. And so we were always at that point, but we also found the benefit of going beyond that. And so that we could deal with it a little bit more strategically. And so we were generally a group that looked at opportunities to do replacement in a way that overall was more cost effective, kind of exceeding requirements on our compliance. But compliance, as you point out, was a enterprise risk that we had. It wasn't just from the fact of making sure that we were in compliance, but also what is the cost of compliance, and what if people change their minds and all of a sudden they want us to do this or want us to do that? And so, that's always a risk that comes into play. And, being a regulated utility, basically you can't get a rate increase. Your rates are completely dependent upon somebody deciding, yes, you deserve to have this. And compliance was more often, it really wasn't, physically replacing them. It was putting in another pipe alongside it and, terminating the old pipe. So we had cast iron pipe, bare steel that, over time would degrade and become more of a safety issue. And we always paid attention to where we were getting leaks, where there was water potentially getting into the system, and then areas, geographies that, had similar types of risk. And that's where we took the strategic approach to, take a look at the information that we're getting and figure out, okay, where can we go and do wholesale changes rather than responding to risks as they popped up.
Right.
And so that was the approach where, we took compliance, but we said, okay, well, if we do more, it probably actually can be better for us and better for the customer to take a better strategic approach.
Right. So it's one of those things where as the consumer, you get those messages on your phone or in the mail.
Yeah.
Oh, these guys are working on it again, but there is a grander plan, I suppose, right?
Absolutely. Yes. I know it's inconvenient and sometimes problematic for people when people are in the street. And obviously, part of my career was dealing with claims and issues with that can happen when you're doing construction. But it was sort of a necessary that we had to do to make sure that our system was safe, the public was safe, our customers were safe.
What was the most common sort of claim that you saw from your people?
Good question. It kind of ran the the gamut. I think the most prevalent theme, though, was when we were doing some sort of excavation. And so, whether that was, related to a manhole, digging in, you see those 811 ads, call ahead to make sure that you locate the, water, natural gas, phone, electric, things like that. And also, customers often have things like dog fences and sprinklers, and those are harder to locate. Obviously, those aren't mapped. So a lot of times you'd see where we're trying to do work, and we didn't realize that there's underground dog fence or our sprinkler system in there, and dig into that. It happened enough that we, found a way to make it more cost effective and better for the customer by not trying to fix that ourselves, but getting some good partners out in the commercial world to come in and do those replacements for us. Even though it seems faster and easier, if they don't do it right, it can be problematic. So you have somebody come in, and actually it's a lot more cost effective to do that.
Excellent. Well, that's a good thing. And so now looking inward a little bit, when you had that position as managing director of strategic planning and corporate development, and then also later in your vice president of regulatory and government affairs,
Yes.
At what point did you really have the ear and eyes of the board?
Well, that went back to strategic planning.
Yeah.
Every year I would help put on a sort of a couple day conference to review our strategy, present new ideas, things like that. Obviously, any time that we found an acquisition opportunity that then met the muster of the executives, presenting that to the board, and then rate cases. If there's no way to escape that, I mean, that's the heart and soul of a utilities business. The board obviously is extremely interested in that. And that's, one of the things that I found was helpful later in my career was doing regulatory work. You generally are dealing with parties that if you remember sort of your Venn diagrams, and there's always, or there should always be some level of overlap.
Yeah.
There are oftentimes in the regulatory world, there's areas where the two parties don't have any overlap, and trying to figure out how to pull those two parties a little bit closer to one another. And obviously, that was really important with the board, because on the other side, you had the commissioners of the Public Service Commission that were, similar type of position. And if those two parties didn't see eye to eye and, allow us to move forward with our, what we're trying to do, they're not going to be moved. So you have to convince, okay, this is okay. We can accept this. We can move forward with it. Or, from the commission side, here's why this is beneficial for the customers. And so you had to figure out ways to bring the two parties together that, oftentimes didn't see eye to eye.
Now, you were a little over 10 years out of college when you started leading these workshop sessions for the board of directors. What did it feel like the first couple of times that you had to lead it?
Frightening.
Yeah, I imagine it would be, a little intimidating.
I was fortunate enough. I wasn't, leading those at the time. I was the manager, and so I reported to somebody, Mark Waltemeyer, who was, one of the officers of the company that kind of helped develop the business planning and strategy, and then later Mike Geiselhart. And so those two folks kind of helped me work my way into it, allowing me to have, smaller roles and then bigger and bigger roles. And then as I became more involved in kind of how things worked and doing the modeling, a bigger and bigger role, to the point where, sometimes, and my wife will remember this and never lets me forget it. There are times when you're on vacation and the board wants to talk about something, and So we were on vacation in Washington, D.C., and I was at the Mount Vernon, and got the call from our CEO that I needed to be on the phone. So I spent about half hour in the sort of annex between the gift shop and the outdoors because it was really cold, taking some phone calls, and then getting a cab back to the hotel so that I could then speak to the board about things. So that was related to the modeling and the scenarios, and they were very interested in sort of what's the upside case, what's the downside, what does this include, how did you come to those conclusions? So doing a really rigorous view of why should we spend $1.6 billion on this acquisition. And that was also, while exciting, that was the very stressful part of the job. Is they're relying on, not solely, but in part, on things that I'm saying to them.
And then as a part of you thinking, I sent this to you 8 months ago and you're calling me on the one time a year I take vacation?
No, acquisitions have their own timeline, and so they develop however they want to. We always said, it's not like going to the grocery store and you can always pick up something. When something pops, it pops, and it's all hands on deck, and you don't stop until, job is done.
All right, we're going to take one more quick break so I can tell you about the Foundation for Risk Management, which has been launched by RIMS. The Foundation for Risk Management is dedicated to shaping the future of the profession. By making a contribution, you are strengthening the global risk management community and investing in the future of the industry. The foundation also supports the Spencer Educational Foundation, but has a different mission. The foundation focuses on providing opportunities for those professionals who have already made the decision to enter risk management and who are just getting started. You can learn more about the foundation by visiting www.rims.org/FRM. And while you're there, be sure to check out information about the Susan Meltzer Scholarship Fund, which was established to honor Miss Meltzer, who was RIMS president in 1999 and 2000. She was a cherished RIMS president and contributed so much to RIMS and the greater risk community. rims.org/FRM. And now let's return to our interview with Eric Lobser.
I know you have a philosophy or a perspective you want to share with the rest of the global risk community. You like ERM, but you wish that the acronym was a little bit different. Tell us what you wish it was.
Yeah, thank you for touching on that. Going to a number of conferences, also talking to folks within our company, it seemed to me that if people viewed enterprise risk management more as enterprise value management, EVM, they would better understand that it's more about, what you need to do to improve the value of your company. And if you look at, going back to my strategic planning days and corporate acquisitions, expected value is about changing those probabilities, not just the impact of those probabilities. And so I think enterprise risk management does a great job of both addressing the likelihood and the impact of things going wrong and things going right. And so what you're really building with ERM is value. You're adding to the value of the company. And I think more people would engage. I think it would really resonate with a lot of the corporate cultures to look at this as a way to build value for the company.
Very good. Let's move a little bit into the latter days and to now.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of ground to cover here, but you for almost 8 years, you were the vice president of ERM at Spire, and that's how we met. And so here you are. The concept of ERM is out there. It just may not have been formalized so much.
Correct.
Right. Yeah. So you leave the regulatory and government affairs position. You go into VP of ERM. How does it feel? And are you able to hit the ground running?
That position started out with insurance and and then later commodity risk management. So other elements of the business that helped me up that learning curve. Obviously, doing acquisitions, doing the regulatory, I understood a lot about the business, my time in operations, and also customer service. helped as well. But then having a couple years where I was in charge of our insurance program, including heading up our captive management, where instead of transferring the risk, there's some risks that you decide to retain. And it's a genuine insurance company. It has all the same rules and regulations as any other insurance company. So understanding how to run a business that dealt solely in risk was a great, transition to eventually getting enterprise risk about 5 years ago. And so, typical fashion, I read every book that I could get my hands on in as much time as I, had, and noticed that some of the things that we were doing, based off of, and you mentioned it earlier before our recording, is ISO 31000.
That's my go-to when I want to sound smart, but I have no idea what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I read through ISO and COSO, and COSO just, to me, felt very intricate and detailed. And I thought, okay, what's the potential that we're going to adopt something? Because in the end, the culture, the business is the one that manages the risk. It's not, even though it sounds like enterprise risk management doesn't manage risk, it oversees how the business manages risk. And so I wanted to pick a framework that fit more with our corporate culture. And even part of ISO 31000 talks about, adjusting it and customizing it and constantly updating it and improving it. So, based off of what I learned, what I knew about the company, I felt like this was a good fit. And it was a little bit different direction. And I think the most important part of that was it was more about strategy and enterprise than I think, our focus was. And just as importantly, it was about, not just what can go wrong and what should we be concerned about happening, but what must go right. And so that looped in a lot of the stuff I learned in strategy. And okay, what are the things that we have to do to be successful, and what could derail us from that? And so, our risks transition a little bit on what we were looking at, and more were oriented around some of our strategic imperatives and, what we had to do to be successful in, achieving our strategic vision.
So, Eric, I've seen you at the RIMS-CRMP conferences in the last few years, which has been great. What, in your opinion, makes a great ERM presentation or session?
To me, it's somebody that's a practitioner. I like to hear from people that have sort of lived through it, have real world experience in the corporate setting. And so they can bring to bear what works and doesn't work and why it didn't work. And, everything's a little bit specific to the company. So what works for one may not for the other. But they bring a level of credibility that to me is important to understand. But then one that is focused on just what we were talking about, which is what helps a company be more successful in executing its strategy. There are a lot of presentations that go into risk registers and integrating stuff on software. Those are all very helpful elements. But in the end, risk management it's kind of basically change management, and it's dealing with very complex systems. And so somebody that can relate to, engaging the business, somebody that can, talk about how they got different areas to collaborate together. And then the most important part that sometimes gets lost is enterprise risk management should be about making better decisions. And those decisions are about how you allocate resources. Resources are limited. You can't, do everything. And so you've got to prioritize. And enterprise risk management helps you to better prioritize using a process when you do the identification and the assessment. The assessment should help you understand how important is this compared to our other risks? What's the time frame of that? Is it something that we need to deal with now or later? What level of mitigation and controls do we already have in place? When should we maybe do this? Are there other areas that are more important than this? Or is there something that's extremely well managed and maybe you can take some resources from there and put it towards a risk that's less well mitigated? And so somebody that can talk to how enterprise risk helps a corporation make better decisions, effectuate those, resource allocations that then helps that company be more successful. In the end, that's what enterprise risk to me is about. And when I hear somebody talk about that, it really resonates with me.
Excellent. That's the best answer we've ever gotten to that question. So that's great. You want people to speak from their experience. That's great.
I mean, when, it's sort of using a bad analogy, but, sort of the definition of pornography. I know it when I see it. When I hear something that really resonates, I'm stealing from some other people's ideas, and I listen to a lot of different podcasts and read white papers and things like that. But when I hear a concept that really resonates with me, I know it when I see it, and I've tried to pull those together. I even used a set of principles that our Enterprise Risk Oversight Committee would look at and understand what are we trying to do here.
Yeah, and that's what they're there for. You're there to be inspired and informed by other people and just pick and choose the parts that might work best for your own organization and you bring it on back.
Absolutely.
And so on a similar note, we've got the Global ERM Award of Distinction call for submissions as this episode is published. And so we can send in those nominations now. In your opinion, and as somebody who has created successful ERM programs, what makes an enterprise risk management program award worthy?
It's a great question. And I think, some of it is going to be based off of the eye of the beholder. Again, like I was talking about, enterprise risk should be customized to the culture. People are going to view as to, what makes a great program a little bit differently. I would hope that one of the key elements that we're all looking at, and as you know, the council is made up of a number of diverse perspectives, and so everybody's going to have their particular idea of, what really resonates with them. For me, what resonates is a program that is well integrated into strategic planning, helps the business make decisions, and the most important thing of all is helps it be more successful.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that it's, a constant upward movement, but it has fewer of those downturns, fewer of those misses than their competitors. And so, as I mentioned before, the business manages risk, but enterprise risk management can help oversee what they're looking at, make sure that their attention is turned to things that, are important, and then, helps them determine, what are the best ways to mitigate or treat or support what we're trying to do with the strategy, prevent some threats from really derailing us. And so in the end, a company that is sort of more consistently successful, I think, is probably the mark of a good enterprise risk program.
Terrific. Well, that's a great sentiment for you to leave us with here. We're going to see you again November 19th and 20th in Columbus, Ohio at the RIMS-CRMP conference. And like we said, you can get your nominations in now for the Global Award of Distinction. We're going to have a special award ceremony like we do every year. And Eric, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I look forward to seeing you in Columbus.
Sounds great. I really enjoyed it. Thanks, Justin.
Thanks again to Eric Lobser for joining us here on RIMScast. We appreciate him and all the great work he does for the RIMS Strategic and Enterprise Risk Management Council. The call for nominations for the RIMS Global ERM Award of Distinction is now open. A link is on this episode's show notes. There are specific attributes that will make a nomination truly award-worthy. Submit your nominations today. Let's talk about RIMS membership, folks. Become a RIMS member and get access to the tools, thought leadership, and network you need to succeed. Visit rims.org/membership or email membershipdept@rims.org for more information. And let's also talk about Risk Knowledge. This is the RIMS searchable content library that provides relevant information for today's risk professionals. Available materials include RIMS executive reports, survey findings, contributed articles, industry research, benchmarking data, and more. For the best reporting on the profession of risk management, check out Risk Management Magazine. This is the Society's official quarterly digital publication. It is written and published by the best minds in risk management. My name is Justin Smulison, Business Content Manager here at RIMS. Please remember to subscribe to RIMScast on your favorite podcasting app. Email us at content@rims.org. Practice good risk management, stay safe, and thank you again for your continued support.